Hi guys, welcome again to this video for our Terraform series. This is video number 7 in our Terraform series. In our last video, we looked at a number of things. We looked at dynamic blocks and how we can create like an EC2 instance. How we can create a security group dynamically, basically using a dynamic block. And you also had an assignment to try and work out how you can run this manifest file, just creating an EC2 instance, but installing a security group, but instead of opening it like this, you want to try and use a dynamic block. So I hope that you tried it out and you're getting a hang of how to play around with Terraform to actually do what you want it to do. And that is the beauty of Terraform as a tool that we use for infrastructure as a code, because you are able to write a code and basically instruct Terraform on what you want it to do and to happen. So we are going to go to our 7th chapter, whereby we are going to look at modules. Now, when we talk about Terraform modules, why we use modules, basically modules enables us to reuse our code. When we write a Terraform file, or when we write a module like an EC2 module or an S3 or a VPC module, when we write it, we enable it so that it can be reused. So that is the whole purpose of modules. Then modules also, they support versioning to maintain compatibility, whereby we can version our modules, right? So especially when you look at the Terraform registry, you see that modules, they have different versions. And that's why it is important, as we said, when you're writing your Terraform code, that you have to remember to put the version of Terraform. And because modules are always versioned, and versioning basically just maintains compatibility. Modules, they store code remotely. You are able to write a module and store it remotely, maybe store it in GitHub or in S3, and basically call it as you need it, right? Then it enables easier testing, enables encapsulating with all the separate resources under one configuration block. So you can have all resources under one configuration block and basically just call out all those configuration as a module, right? Then modules can be nested inside other modules, allowing you to quickly spin up whole separate environment. So you can nest, you can have a module inside a module. So a module inside a module, that would be called like a child module, right? Then they can be refined using the source attribute. Now, when Terraform, it supports both local and remote modules. So local modules, they are stored alongside your Terraform configuration. Like the examples that we're going to see, I can write a module. Then once I write a module like this, then I have my main.tf file right here. So my module can be stored alongside my Terraform configuration file. So therefore, this is a local module, right? That is, you just basically put files in a separate directory outside of each environment, but in the same repository, right? And then for the source, now you just give a path. You will just give the path to where that module is. So remote modules are stored externally in a separate repository and support versioning. So for example, I can store a remote module. I can store, let's say, in GitHub, right? I can store in GitHub. or I can get it in S3 bucket. I can get in GCS buckets, right? So all these are like the supported backends where you can store your modules. So it could be a local path, it could be the Terraform registry, it could be GitHub or Bitbucket or S3 buckets. So once you store your modules here, then you're just able to call them and use them. Now, if you've written a module, right, there are some requirements or things that are needed for you to be able to publish, this module, like on the registry, or for you to be able to publish it so that it becomes a public module for different people to use it. Now, what are the requirements? One, it must be on GitHub and must be a public repo if using a public registry. So this is the requirement. If you want to write a module and have people use it, then that module must be on GitHub and it must be a public repo, right? Then it must be named Terraform with a provider name, right? Where the name reflects the type of infrastructure, and module managers and provider is the main provider where it creates that infrastructure. E.g., you can say Terraform Google Vault or Terraform AWS EC2 instance. So there is a naming convention how you're supposed to name your modules, right? Then it must maintain the XYZ tags for release to identify module versions. Release tags names must be semantic versions, which can optionally be prefixed with a V, for example, version 104 or 019. So there's an element of versioning that must be adhered to. Then must maintain the standard module structure, which allows the registry to inspect the module and generate documentation, track resource usage, pass submodules and examples and more. So these are some of the requirements if you want to write a module and publish it, right? So it must adhere to this module. So with that said, let's see just an example of how we can write a module. So a module, we can have a simple, we can create a directory. We can create a directory, like here, a directory we've created is, and this directory we've just called it EC2, right? Now in this directory, inside of this directory, this EC2 directory, this is where we are putting our resource. One, I've put a data source, because this data source, I want to use this data source to get my AMI, right? Then with that data source, I also have an EC2 resource.tier. Now in this EC2.tier, I'm just passing a resource. This is my resource. I'm just creating an instance, and the name of the instance is just EC2, right? And for the AMI, I'm using a data source, right? The same data source that I have here. That is the data source that I'm calling right here. Then after I call the data source, the instant type, I'm passing it as a T2 micro, right? I can create a variable file and pass this instant type as T2 as a variable. And then for the tags, I'm passing a tag as a variable. And the tag here, I'm passing it a var.ec2 name. So I'm passing a variable here called ec2 name, right? And the type is a string. But remember, now this variable, I haven't passed any default value. Therefore, this will be an input variable. So it means that at the time when I'm initializing or when I'm running this module, I will need to input this EC2 name, right? This becomes an input variable. Then I have an output. I have an output here. I'm just trying to output the instant ID, right? The instant ID. Once it creates, the value is AWS instance, that is the resource type. Then the resource name, this is EC2 and the ID. So this is what I'm trying to output. Once I create this resource, then I want to output this. So I can break down this file and separate it in I can make a variable file and I can make an output file, but they are all going to be within the same directory. So what I can do in this directory, I can create a new file, and this file I can call it variables.tf. Now, inside that variables.tf, what I can do, I can go to my EC2, and what I can do is I can cut this variable. I can cut it from there and put it inside of my variable file. That's variable file. And then what I can do, I can also pass this instant type as a variable, right? As a variable. So I can go to my variable, then I can say variable, and my variable is instance underscore type. I want the instant type, right? Then curly braces, then here the type equals to string, right? The type is string. Then I put the default value. Default equals to, then it was a T2 micro. So this is my default value for the instant type. So therefore now I can go back to my EC2, and here for the instant type, let me call this variable is instant. I can use a different name. I could just say inst type. Okay. So I can do here and call this as a variable now. So I can say var dot inst type. That is the name inst type. That is the name that I gave to this variable. So inst type. So I have this. This is my resource. Then I can also create an output. I can create an output file. So I can copy this. Sorry, I can make a new file, and call it output.tf. Then go to my EC2 and just cut this out, cut it, and put it in my output. So I'm outputting in just the instance ID. So now all these files are inside of this EC2 directory. So this EC2 directory now becomes a module. It is a module that is creating an EC2 instance. It is a module that is outputting and the instance ID, right? And I'm passing these variables. Now, once I have this as my module, then I need to create my main.tf. Main.tf, this is now where I'm calling this module. So I go to my main.tf. Now the main.tf, now I have my provider, my Terraform block, right? Then I have my provider where I'm passing my credentials, and then I have my module block, right? module block. As we remember, the module block, it only requires one label. So this is just a name that you're giving to the module, the name that is local to Terraform. So this, you can give it any name. So this is we have given it a name as EC2 module. But then a module will have a source, right? It will have a source. So what is the source? The source of the module, you are referencing it to that EC2, which is this EC2 directory. Now here it means it is in the same directory. It means that the source, this module that I'm calling, is in the same directory, in the same working directory, right? Which is the EC2, and the name is EC2, right? And equally now here, I'm also passing the variable at runtime. There is a variable in the variable file, this variable EC2 name, that we didn't have a default value. So therefore, we have to pass it at runtime. So we are passing this variable. So I'm passing this variable right here, EC2 name equals to, so I'm giving the name. So this will become the name of, or rather this will now become the tag. Because if you look at this variable, if you look at the EC2 instance, the tag is the name, the tag is var.ec2 name. And this EC2 name is the variable, is this variable here, which is now an input variable. So I'm inputting that variable right here. So when I initialize, it is going to initialize the module, then it is going to pass this name as a variable, right? It is going to pass that name as a variable. And then also, remember inside of this EC2 module, EC2 directory, we had an output. We are outputting, we want to know the instance ID, the EC2 ID, right? So there is an output. So if you want to reference an output of a resource within a module somewhere, you must create an output within that same module. So if we want to get the instance ID, like we want to get the instance ID to be referenced anywhere else, then inside the module itself, you must have an output. So we create an output. So think about it like a module is like a container, a box that has been closed. Everything is working inside of that container. Now, if you want to access anything inside of that container, you must create an output. There must be a door that allows something to come out. So this is what we are calling an output. So you must create an output to be able to access anything within that module, right? So that's why inside the module itself, we created an output. So with that output present, then outside the module, outside of this directory, because this EC2 inside, it has an output. So outside of this directory, when we go to our main, so we are able to access that output. Now, how do we access the output? We are again using an output block, and we are just saying we are giving it a name. This is module output. But what is the value? The value is the module. This is the module, right? And this is the module name EC2, because once you run this, it is initializing this EC2, right? It is initializing this EC2 module. So the value will be the value of this module, but inside of this module, it will be looking for the instant ID. Now that instant ID, how was it called? When you go to your output inside of the module, the output is called instant ID, right? It's called instant ID. So when this main, it looks for the instant ID, it will be looking for this value, which is AWS instant.ec2.id, right? So now this is how we're going to reference and get an output from here. So this is our basic EC2 module. So now what we can do is we can go to our terminal. So with our terminal, we can cd into modules. So we can cd into Terraform, and then cd into modules, which is 7. And then we are going to cd into example 1. EC2, right? Example 1. So once we are inside of this module, example 1, if we ls right here, we see that we have an EC2 directory under main.tf. So from here, inside of that directory, so we can initialize. So let's run Terraform init. So we do Terraform init. And I'd like you to watch what is going to happen once we initialize. So right here, once you initialize, the first thing Terraform init does is it initializes modules. Okay. So this is the first thing it does. In the past, we've just been creating resources. That's why it just went ahead to initialize the backend and initialize the plugin. But the order in which it happens is if you have modules, Terraform init will first initialize your modules. It will initialize your modules. If your modules are local, like this is a local module, it is on my computer, right? It is stored on my computer. So it is going to initialize this. It is going to reference this and initialize it. If this module was like in GitHub or in S3, so what it will do is that it will go ahead and download this module first. It will download this module and save it inside this .terraform directory. So it will initialize by downloading it and saving inside of this .terraform. Then once it downloads that and initializes, then it will initialize your backend. As we will see, your backend could be local. It will find where is it going to save your state file. So if it's saving your state file locally, or is it in S3 bucket, right? So it will look into that. Then it will initialize your provider. Your provider, like for our case, it is AWS. So it will go ahead and download all the plugins for AWS. So it will initialize that. Then now, once it has initialized that, if we run Terraform plan, once you run the plan, I don't know why this error keeps coming up. Keeps coming up. All right, let me run Terraform plan. Once I run my plan, then it is going to show that it's going to add one resource, and it's creating it from a module. The module is EC2 module, but it's an AWS instance .ec2. So this is the resource that is creating, but it's within this particular module. So the actual resource is creating is this EC2, right? And then the AMI, it is getting this AMI dynamically from a data source, from this particular data source as we saw. So now we see that it has initialized our modules, and it has a plan that it's going to create this EC2 instance. And the output, we will know the output once we run apply. So now with that, we can run Terraform apply auto approve. Auto.approve. So once we run that, then it now creates our state file, right? It is now creating our EC2 instance from a module, right? And now we've customized this module. So this EC2 is now what we call a custom module. We've customized it, and therefore this code can be reusable. I can call this code from anywhere. If I want to create an EC2 instance, right, anywhere. So all that I have to do is that I can just call this module because it has everything. It has the data source, it has the variables, it has the output. So all that, if I just want to create an EC2 instance, I can just call this module, right, by just referencing the path, and it will find this module and create the path. So therefore, it makes this module reusable. I don't have to go back to write the code, to write all this again. So all I have to do is just call it. So I can do apply on a module and basically just call that module. And you see now the output, it has outputted for us that instance ID, the instance that it has just created, right? So that is the basic module. Now, what I will do is that I will run Terraform destroy. Terraform destroy. All right. Auto approve, not auto apply. Once it destroys that, then we will look at another module. We will look at another module. Still destroying. Okay, it's completed. So I'll just delete that. The state file. I'll delete the log. I'll also delete the Terraform. Okay, so that was example one, and that's our basic EC2 module. Now, in this example two, now we are going to create a DB, a database server, which we are calling a DB, and it's basically a module. We are going to create an EIP, an elastic IP. We are creating it as a module. We are creating a security group. We are creating it as a module, and we are creating a web server. Now, this web server, we are also creating it as a module. So now we have these four things. So let's look at the code. Let's look at the code. Let's start with this database. So for this database, I have the AMI data source that I'm using. But when you go to the db.tf, right here, I'm just creating an instance. Now, this instance is just a resource that I'm calling DB. I'm using a data source for my AMI, and the instant type is, again, T2 micro, right? T2 micro. And the tags, I've just passed the tag as DB server, right? And I'm outputting the private IP, right? I'm outputting the private IP. So this is the value. It is AWS instance, which is the resource type dot resource name, which is DB dot private IP. I want to get a private IP, private underscore IP. So this is H to do with this database server. Okay. And then I'm also creating an EIP. This elastic IP, I'm creating it as a resource, which is AWS underscore EIP, and its name, I'm just giving it as the web IP, because I'm going to attach this. I'm going to attach this on my web server, right? I'm going to attach this on my web server. And the instance, it is a variable which I'm calling var.instantID, right? var.instantID. Now, this var.instantID, again, I'm passing it here. I don't have a default value. Therefore, it is going to be like an input. It is going to be like an input variable, right? It is going to be an input variable because I am not passing a default value here. And then I also have an output. Now this output, want to output a public IP, right? Which is EIP, web IP, public IP, right? Like that. So then if I go now to before I go to the security group, if I go to my web, I have the AMI, data source. Then I'm also passing this script that we've seen before. This script is going to be bootstrapped on our web server. Then the web.tf file, I'm creating this web instance. The AMI, I'm using the data source. The instant type is a T2 micro, right? And then I'm passing this user data as a file, and this user data is basically a script. And where is the script? The script is inside of this directory, right? Is inside of this directory, the present working directory, inside of the web. Then this is the server script, right? Because this script, when I'll be initializing, I'm initializing from the main. I'll be initializing from the main. So if I close all this, I'm initializing from the main, right? But all this is inside of the directory. So to initialize, the path to that script is inside of this working directory, but is inside of this folder or this directory, which is called web. Then that is the name of the script. So that is the name of the script. So in web.tf, as we've seen, we are also passing a security group. So I'll talk about the security group in a bit. But we are also passing an output. The output, we want the public IP. And the value, it will be from the module, which is the EIP, this module, EIP, and public IP. This is the output that we want. Because we are out, if we want an output from this module, we must create an output. If we want to reference it somewhere, we must create an output. So we created an output here for public IP. So it is this public IP that we are referencing here, right? We are referencing it here. We want the module, what is the module name? EIP. This is the module name, EIP. Then we want the output that is called public IP. So that will be our output from here. And then with that, we are also now calling the module EIP inside of this resource. So this module now becomes what we call a child module, because we are calling this module here, we are calling security group module, but we are calling them inside of this web module, okay? We are calling them inside of this web module. So these are child modules because they are within this main module, which is the web module. So we are calling it, and now the source, it is 2 directories back. It is not inside of this directory. We have to move 2 steps back and we will find the EIP, right? And the instance ID where we are attaching this EIP, the instance ID is AWS instance web.id, right? .id. That is when we go to this EIP module, the variable is supposed to be instance ID, right? Where are they finding this instance ID? This instance ID here. They are finding it here, right? Instance ID. It is the AWS instance.web ID. It is the ID of this instance that is being called inside of that other module. Then we also have a security group module, which we are calling SG. The source is 2 steps back to this SG module, right? To this SG module. Now, this security group, it is being referenced, it is being attached to this instance as security groups. So if we are using security groups, then it will be a list, but we are passing security group name. We are passing the name, okay? We are just passing the name of the security group. So here, we are getting that name from the module.sg. We are getting that name from this SG, right? Module.sg. And this is the security group, which we are running as a dynamic block, but we have an output. An output is called SG_name. So we want to get this output. And with this output, it is going to give us the security group, web traffic. It is going to give us the name, right? And this is the name that we are interested in to reference right here. Module security group, and it's the security group name. So this is the output name. This is the output name in that security group. So now with this, we now have this web has child modules. We have the security group module, we have the EIP module, and we have the DB module, right? Then now, when we want to initialize, we will cd inside of this directory, but what we'll be initializing, we are initializing everything from our main.tf, right? Our main.tf, it has our provider, our Terraform block, our provider. Then we are initializing our DB module, right? Here. And the source is, it is in this present working directory. Then we are equally initializing our web module. When we initialize our web, inside the web, it will initialize the EIP and security group, because these two are inside of the web, right? Then the output will be this private IP, which is coming from the DB module, because inside the DB module, there was an output for private IP. So we are going to get it as an output after we initialize our module. Then we are also getting a public IP, which comes from the web module, because in this web module, we had an output. So you look at the web, you look at the output. The output is public IP. That is the name. So we will get the value of this when we initialize our main, right? We will get this public _IP. Okay. So let's go ahead and now initialize. Let's go ahead and initialize our module. So I'll just clear. Now we need to cd into example 2. Right now we're in example 1. So I'll cd back and cd into example 2. Example 2.db, right there. So once we cd inside there, then we'll do Terraform in it. So we will initialize. So once we initialize our modules, so we see first it initializes the modules. It initializes the DB module. It initializes the web module in web. Then it initializes the EIP that is inside of the web. Then it initializes the security group that is inside of the web, right? So it initializes modules first. Then it initializes the backend. Now the backend is basically our local. Once it initializes the backend, then it downloads the provider. So once it downloads the provider, it has initialized everything. Then now we can run Terraform validate. If I run Terraform validate to check the validity of the code, it is successful. If I run Terraform plan, it's gonna generate for me a plan on what it's gonna create. So if we look at that, it plans to create a DB instance, and then it will create a web instance. And then apart from the web instance, it is going to create an elastic IP, EIP. Then it is going to create a security group, right, called web traffic, with all those ports open. So it plans to add 4, 0 to change and 0 to destroy. Then the private IP, these are outputs from the main module. Private IP and public IP, they will be known after we run apply. After we run apply. So we can just do Terraform apply. Order. Approve. So approve. Now it is going to create creating a security group. Then it creates the web instance. And now it's creating the DB instance. So it is still creating them. Still creating them. All right, so it's done. That's now the private IP of the web, and this is the public IP of the web, which is the same as the elastic IP. So now if I go to my browser, I go to EC2, go to EC2, then I should be able to see a DB server and a web server that I just created. And they're now the initializing. And I've attached an elastic IP which is now the same as the public IP, because I created an elastic IP and I attached it to this web server, right? I attached this elastic IP. Then the security group, the name is allow web traffic, because I attached this security group. I attached this security group on this web server. So now here I see that I've been able to create these two instances. I created an elastic IP and I created a security group using modules. Now if I go on this web server and I click on connect, and I click on SSH, you realize that I didn't pass any key. So I'm not able to log into this instance, right? I'm not able to log into this instance. So what I would like you to do now is once you go on in this code and associate a key with this instance, right? Associate a key with this instance so that you are able to log in. You are able to log into this instance. Why? Because we ran a script on it. I know we can just access that particular script if we just by using the public IP. By using the public IP, we are able to go on the browser. Let's see, we are able to go on the browser. This is the public IP that we had. That is the public IP. If we copy and go on our browser, yes, this HTTP. So we are able to access that script ran. It was basically bootstrap, right? It was bootstrap. So we are able to access that. If we go on to, I think it's up one, we are able to access that because that script was bootstrap. But apart from this, we cannot just SSH. We can't SSH into this server because we don't have a key. So try and associate a key with this server, with both of these servers, and see if you can SSH into them. All right. So with that, we will come to the end of our video today. During our next video, I'll show you guys now how we can get modules from the registry. What we've been using, these are custom modules that you can write. And again, you can write any module. You can write an S3 module. You can write modules to do different things in Terraform. Put them in a directory and then just call them from wherever. If you want to create a security group, just call that module. Go to the module, change the variables. If you want to open port 9000, go to your security group, and if you have variables, go to your security group, and go to your variables and just change the variables. Now, as a matter of fact, while you're working in these modules, just modularize them, like create a variable file such that you will only be going to a variable file instead of you working in a directory, a file like this, because chances are you can easily mess up or you can easily corrupt these other files. That's why when you use modules, you have to break up your file so that all you are doing is just going into your variable file and just changing. If I want to create port 8080, I just go to my variable and I just add an increase port 8080. Maybe that is the only port I want to. I'm configuring my Jenkins server and I just want to open port 8080. I want to attach a security group. So I can just call this security group as a module, go to my variables and just change the port here, put port 80, maybe 8080, right? Or 8080, then just call the module. It is going to create the security group for you, and it's going to attach it to your Jenkins server. So try and do that. Modularize these files, go through these directories, and create a variable files, create an output file, then have this security group just as a standalone in a security group file, but they all have to be within this same module, same directory. Then just run Terraform and see. But next time, in the next video, I'll show you guys how we can now create like a VPC, using modules from the registry. All right. So with that, thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.